Let's now turn to the United Kingdom, where the economy would shrink and perform worse than other advanced economies, including Russia, as the cost of living continues to hit households, the International Monetary Fund has said. The IMF said the economy will contract by 0.6% in 2023, rather than grow slightly, as previously predicted. However, the IMF also said that it thinks the UK is now on the right track. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said the UK outperformed many forecasts last year. But Shadow Chancellor Richard Reeves said the figures showed the UK lagging behind its peers. The IMF, which works to stabilize economic growth, said it had downgraded its forecast for the UK because of its high energy prices, rising mortgage cost, and increased taxes, as well as persistent workers' shortages. It did not mention Brexit in its reports as a factor for the UK not performing, as well as others. The UK is expected to be the only country to shrink next year across all the advanced and emerging economies. Even sanctions hit Russia is now forecast to grow this year. And joining me from the United Kingdom via Skype is a global affairs analyst, Benga Onifade. Good to have you join us.
Hi, good afternoon.
So I just want to re-echo what the Shadow Chancellor Richard Reeves said, and she said that these figures show that the UK is lagging behind its peers. Why is it that when it comes to economic growth at this time, we're seeing the UK being an outlier amongst its peers?
Well, we have a few reasons. UK is just waking up from the pandemic, and which of course is a global entity. So we're not going to blame that or call that a good reason. And of course, I think yesterday marked the third anniversary of leaving the European Union as a member of UK. So coupled with the pandemic and of course the cost of living crisis, UK literally just about got some of these things right in terms of the agreements in order to be able to charter their own course when it comes to making their own decisions on key trades. So of course all of this is actually culminated into a big deal for the UK. And of course, yes, you're right, worse than G7 countries, including Russia, even Nigeria as well. But however, there's always an argument. People tend to say the IMF has always got, they got a record of undermining the UK economy, and since 2016, I probably will say they've actually been calling it wrong, unfortunately. But of course, UK is not exactly great in terms of performance right now. But I think going into 2020, coming about the Brexit and wave of strikes, and of course UK being probably one of the hardest hits in terms of strikes and in terms of inflation, compared to the EU or the G7 compatriots. So I think yes, IMF probably have a reason to say, going forward again, they think they still, while everyone gets positive rating, UK will, the world is growing, but we believe that UK will underperform.
Mm. And do you think that the IMF is calling it wrong this time? And then there were also talks about recession late last year. Is that still in the cards? Are there concerns that that is still in the cards?
Oh, absolutely. I think every major organization in the UK is expecting a recession. People think it will be mild, but the other problem is people think it will be worse than the G7 than the other G7 countries. And of course, we keep getting data that's coming out. For example, today the housing data came out, and I think this is actually the worst in terms of since 2010. I think in terms of housing approval, this has actually been the worst since 2019. This has been worst on record. And also when you look at the global or the productivity rates for each individual person, it actually has been really down. I think from 17,000 in 2000 in 1985 up to year 2019 when it was about 30,000. But it actually dipped from 2020 and is yet to recover. So IMF again, they do have a reason to say that. Yes, of course, Brexit hasn't been mentioned, but I think it's an open secret that Brexit is actually one of the major phenomena that's got this thing right, that this major contributing factor or effects. Another thing is, while UK is doing everything to try and correct, the effects of Brexit, of course, via immigration, but of course, again, one of the key things which the key politicians are trying to do is encourage and get people back into work, because people are getting comfortable with working from home. People believe productivity has dropped as a result of that. By 7%, I think data has come out there to show that the productivity is not exactly at where it was at the peak period where it was pre-Brexit. So IMF do have a reason, but at the same time, I believe the government is actually working with the major organizations, trying to get people back. But unfortunately, are we looking at a recession at some point this year? We believe so. Personally, I believe so too. All data actually does point to that. How mild it will be, I don't know. And one of the reasons is the fact that when the central bank, which is an independent union here, really, or entity, they realize we do have a problem. Inflation at 40-year high, record high, while the Fed, which is the Central Bank of America entity in this case, they did, instantly perform an action of saying, okay, we're going to raise interest rates. I think UK was a bit slow. That's another factor. Another reason is,
and the IMF basically has been warning countries, trying to deal with the economic crisis in their countries by raising interest rates. But I also want to talk to you about a couple of things, but I have to settle for this, which is the issue of migration, because we see that a lot of people, especially from Nigeria, are migrating to the UK, especially for education. How is that is that a contributing factor? And in what way is it contributing?
So you're right. When it comes to education, whichever way you look at it, education is business, unfortunately. And at some point, the key pointer for the UK was you will come here, get your degree, and then you go back home. But at some point, of course, the country is actually looking at the education department. They are looking at other areas, other sectors, other countries which are competitors for the Nigerian crowd, the Nigerian money, if you look at it. But at some point, Nigerians thought, okay, if I'm going to come here and I'm not even allowed to work with my degree, then I would rather pick, other relatively safer countries, the United States, Australia, Canada in this case. But then UK had to switch stance now and say, okay, you can work for 2 years. Now you can bring relatives. They made it softer. And of course, that has actually been, in a way, you could say it's booming the education sector financially, of course, the coffers. And the other way you look at it as well, while the Home Office are paying X amount of money, you as coming in as a foreigner, especially from Nigeria, you've got to pay, 3-4 times what they pay, and you've got access, to no access at all to public funding. And when it comes to work, you can only limit, you are limited in terms of what work you can do. Again, employers they tend to frown on recruiting this kind of people or sponsoring them for a long time. So it's a win for the UK. It's a bit of a loss for Nigeria in this case. But yes, you are right. It's contributing financially to the coffers of the United Kingdom.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Benga Nifade. Always great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.